Hello and welcome to the Paid Media Lab podcast. My name is James. I'm the content lead here at Lunio, and in this episode I'm speaking with Sophie Logan, who is the PPC lead at Beauhurst, which is a leading private company database tool for the UK market. Sophie has a particular interest in B2B and SaaS brands, and she specializes in search and display campaigns. She speaks at numerous conferences and industry events every year, and she's a regular contributor to Search Engine Land. In this conversation, we dive deep into the topic of competitor keyword bidding across paid search, which can be a bit of a tricky and contentious issue, especially when you've got multiple rival brands fighting it out amongst each other to try and win impression share in the search engine results page. So Sophie is here to guide us through her approach to ensuring you're only picking the right battles you know you can win, while also generating a decent return on your ad spend in the process. With that said, let's get into all things competitor bidding. Sophie, welcome to the Paid Media Lab. Very glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
When we caught up briefly yesterday, you said that your dog, Dexter, was quite purdy, bless him. Is he doing better today?
He's done better today, but he has been confined to the kitchen, so he will not be disturbing us today.
And I saw he also has the very fitting nickname of the PPC pug. And is that something that you christened him with shortly after getting him, or did he acquire that name later on?
Yes, he was an office dog before COVID hit. So yeah, he was part of the paid media team. So PPC plug.
Nice. And from your LinkedIn post, he even made an appearance on one of your slides at the Brighton SEO talk, which you recently gave. So how did that talk go at Brighton?
Yeah, it went really well. I was at the end of the day, so I know it was a long day, so I was really appreciative of people who stuck around and didn't go to get ice cream and beers along the beachfront. So it went really well. But yeah, he's in every single deck that I do, so I had to make sure he got in by the end.
Nice. I'm a little bit jealous that I wasn't at Brighton SEO this year because it does sound really good, but fingers crossed that I will make it down there for next year. For anyone watching or listening that wants to see what Dexter the PPC pug looks like, be sure to follow Sophie on LinkedIn, where you'll also be able to catch her insights, tips, and recaps of her event talks. So today we are going to be focusing on how to run high-performing competitor campaigns across paid search. And before we get into all the details of keywords, budgets, and landing pages and things like that, we're going to start off with the basic fundamentals and principles. So, Sophie, first of all, in what scenarios or contexts would you recommend bidding on competitor brand names? And are there any circumstances where you definitely recommend just avoiding it altogether?
I think it's very important that you need to make sure that you can either offer exactly what your competitor is offering or ideally something better. I see a lot of people trying to take on competitors where they haven't really got the clout and the product or the service to do so. So I think it's very important that people take that into consideration before they start. In particular, this works really well with B2B and SaaS, which is just what I happen to specialize in, because we know that a lot of businesses and a lot of companies and brands, they really dominate those industries. So if you've got something that's a worthy alternative for people, getting out there and letting them know that you exist is a great way of doing it through competitive bidding. I always describe it as just kind of, hey, we're over here. Have you noticed us? Why don't you have a checkout of us guys instead? So that's when I think it's an ideal scenario. So you've got something to offer or something better, ideally better. You really want to show people what you've got.
So would you say even if you are, an e-commerce or retail brand, that it's not something that you should shy away from, even though traditionally it's always been strongly associated with B2B and SaaS in particular? Do you feel that this is still viable and still worth experimenting with in the e-com sector?
Yeah, I'm seeing it a lot just personally as I'm shopping, trying to do a bit of Christmas shopping early in advance. I'm seeing that a lot of, B2C ecom people are using it as well. Again, it's always a very similar thing, ASOS and Boohoo or ASOS and Pretty Little Thing, something very similar. Again, just to kind of say, hey, how about you check out this as well? I will say the one thing I always think people should take into consideration is, do you want to really poke the bear with your competitors? Do you want to start competitive bidding? And, it can get a little bit nasty. It can increase your costs. It can, generate a little bit of bad blood amongst businesses. So I will say that that's one thing that I think people need to take consideration. If they're like, yeah, I want to do it, the last question is like, are you ready for this battle? Because if you do it to them, they can do it to you as well.
Yeah, so if you're in that situation where you haven't started that kind of bidding war yet, just think about the implications. That's wise advice, I'd say. So that kind of relates to this next question, but some people might think, okay, well, we want to bid on competitor brand names. Well, we'll just follow a similar approach and strategy to our other campaigns that we're already targeting other, branded or non-branded keywords on. But why would you say that these types of campaigns are unique and they require a bit of a different approach and strategy when it comes to optimizing them?
I think the most important thing that people need to remember on this is that you could easily spend all of your budget on your competitors' names. You've got to still be focusing on what you're doing, your campaigns, your generic campaigns, your brand campaigns, whatever you've got that's running at the moment, and treat these a little bit differently. So I never go in with a big budget for these because, again, like I say, it'll get swallowed up really quickly. I am a lot more reserved with my bidding strategies when I do competitive bidding. So I know we have target impression share. I see people put, I want to pay 100% of the time first position for my competitor. And that's great, but you could be spending £20 on a click for your competitor's name. It's not really worth it. So for me, it's been a little bit more reserved, a little bit more considerate, starting small with it and building it out if you see the results that you were looking to find.
Yeah, so on that note, you may be in a market where it's quite crowded, and let's say you have maybe 10 different competitors that you could potentially go after. And to your point there, if you decided that you want to go after all 10, that's going to get incredibly expensive very quickly and just annihilate your budget. So if you're in that position where there's loads of different competitors that you could potentially go for, how would you decide, which basket to put your eggs into? Should you go after the big players in your field, or should you go after the kind of smaller to medium-sized brands if that's where you're at as a business currently yourself?
The first thing that I like to do is to see who's bidding on me. That's always a good place to start. I think a lot of the times we forget to search ourselves in search engines, and I'm always surprised to see who's bidding on our brand. So I always think that that's a good place to start. It also shows, again, with the poke and the bear, they've already poked you, you just haven't poked back. So that's always one that I'd say to look at first. But I do think that you've also got to go with a similar size that you're looking for your company. There's no point in a smaller e-com business trying to take on Amazon, for example, who are paying everybody's search results all the time. So thinking a little bit more about the size that you are, your capabilities, your product range, what you've got. And again, really making sure that you're offering something very similar price points, just homing a little bit more. You can always add people in further down the line, just trying to be quite strategic with the ones that you pick to start off with initially.
Yeah, that makes sense. So could you maybe now just kind of, if there is anyone interested in trying this out and they haven't done much of it before, could you kind of take us through a step-by-step process of how you would approach setting up these campaigns and getting going with competitor bidding on paid search?
So first of all, it's, as we've just discussed, working out who you want to bid against. That's probably the one that's going to take some more time, a bit more research. If you've got a sales team or business development, they might be able to help you out and say, these are our direct competitors, or these are the guys that we want to go after. I hate to call it this, but I call it my target list. That's what I call them. And then that's your very initial starting point. So once you've got that, the rest will follow quite nicely. I prefer to set up a specific campaign for the competitors. So it's one campaign called competitors. And then each one of those ad groups is a different competitor. The reason I do this is that some of the competitors are a little bit different. So I can tailor my keywords or my ad copy specific for that competitor, not a one size fits all. It's very direct against my target list. And with that in mind, again, as many people know, and if you don't know, you can't actually use your competitor's name in your ad copy. It's trademark infringement. It's against the law. It's illegal. We don't want to get in trouble. You can get in a lot of trouble for that. So the next part, which takes a lot of time, is actually crafting that ad copy to show why you're better, a bit more backing, a bit more evidence. But I'm going to be a little controversial here. I know some people really like them. I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn. I don't really like the ad copy when people are like, oh, those guys suck, or we're so much better than XYZ. Like, the better competitor campaigns that I see are the ones where people take that time to write ad copy, which is persuasive and informative and backs up what they're trying to say. So I think that's a very important part of the campaign creation. So yeah, please don't use your competitors' names, because you can get in trouble. You can get suspended off like Google Ads, forever. So it's not worth it.
Yeah, it does make me cringe a little bit when you see those kinds of ad copy where it's just blatantly like, oh, so much better, 10 times better than whatever it is. I think, to your point though, there is a lot of opportunity there to get quite clever and creative in your ad copy, where you might not be necessarily directly and explicitly calling anyone out, but by phrasing your ad copy in a certain way and nodding to certain pain points and complaints that people might have with your competitors, you can kind of make it implicit who you're referring to and what other competitors you might be targeting through your campaign, but you don't have to kind of explicitly go out there and say we're so much better. It's a better look.
It looks better, and also, yeah, it might get you some likes and stuff, and people might find it like funny. But just, especially depending on your industry, if you're a legal company, for example, it doesn't look very classy. We want to still stay professional. It might work a little bit better for B2C e-com. We've probably got a little bit more creative and cheekiness side to their tone of voice. But for some industries, it just come across as you're wasting an opportunity of like proving to people that you are better. Don't just say that you're better, prove it to them, prove them to them why.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of touched on it earlier in some of your responses, but you said in terms of budget allocation to start small, and your advice would be to be quite conservative with these kinds of campaigns and test the waters first of all to figure out if they're working. You haven't mentioned bidding strategies as well, but is there any kind of recommendation you'd give when setting a bidding strategy for these kinds of campaigns?
So the way that I have been doing them at the moment is I used to have the target impression share. I liked that idea when that first came out. I got really excited and I used it all the time. And I realized I was spending a lot of money to get clicks for competitors' names. So I've moved away from that now. Personally, I go for a max click bid strategy, but I add a max CPC caveat on that. Otherwise, because as I said, those cost per clicks can keep going and going. And do I really want to spend £30 on a click for my competitor's brand name? Probably not. So that helps to control it a little bit more. With budgets, I would also say, if you have only £3 a day, for example, to use on a competitor campaign, if you've looked at your budget, what you've got, actually, is that £3 better spent on your own campaigns rather than trying to chase after your competitors? Competitive bidding is great, but sometimes I feel like we can still focus on what you're doing, your own thing, without having to go after your competitors. So try and be a little bit realistic with what you're going to be able to achieve with your budget, because with competitive bidding, it is not going to be cheap.
Yeah, it's wise advice. And we're going to touch on landing pages briefly, but just we don't have time to go into all the details of landing pages. I know this is one of your areas of expertise, and there's a lot that you could tell us about landing pages. But what are the kind of top level things that people should keep in mind in relation to landing pages for these kinds of competitor campaigns?
I am biased. I like a PPC specific landing page for your competitors, competitor campaigns. I find sending them to the homepage is just it's a little bit of a wasted opportunity. Personally, like I say, I'd prefer to have a PPC landing page specific for your competitor campaign, so you can really dig into those things again, like what is making you better than your competitor. Sometimes I see people have a table which compares their features to their competitors, especially in the SaaS industry. You see that quite regularly. I think that's fine, as long as you're backing it up with facts, you're not just making things up. But again, be careful with what you are putting on your landing page, because you still need to be respectful to your competitor. You don't want to upset them. You don't want to say anything inflammatory, or still be respectful about it. Prove why you're better with things about you. Focus less on them. Yeah,
that's good advice for life in general, and it goes beyond landing pages and competitor campaigns. So if someone's kind of up and running with their campaign, what are the metrics or indicators that you pay closest attention to when you're assessing the performance of these particular campaigns?
Again, I am very biased. I'm B2B lead gen, SaaS specific. So for me, anyone in B2B or lead gen, you are looking at not necessarily the conversion rates. Try and think a little bit further down the line of that lead to sale rate. Are you seeing that these people are high value? Are they actually converting? Because it's very easy for someone to fill out a form with stuff like this. They're researching lots of companies, they're gathering lots of information, but are they continuing to go down that funnel, or are they still going to go with their competitors? So I think that's a really important thing to keep an eye on. Although I do see a lot of people running competitor campaigns just for the sake that they want to take up ad space. They want to, get eyes on their ads. They're not necessarily bothered about the conversion rates, lead rate, sale rate, anything like that. They actually just want that exposure. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that a lot of businesses, we need to see money in the bank coming from these campaigns to be able to justify it. If you're a business which doesn't, I'm very jealous. Get your name out there, get everywhere. That's great. But for a lot of us, at the end of the day, if it's not going to bring money in the bank after 2 to 3 months of working through your metrics, then maybe it's time to pull it back or pause it altogether.
Yeah, they're becoming increasingly rare, those businesses where there's just like, well, just spend the money on brand awareness and don't worry about showing me the return on that. Yeah, that's
unicorns. Don't hear of them very often anymore.
Yeah. So obviously you've kind of mentioned earlier on about poking the bear and kind of touched on some of the things that can potentially step on some toes or go wrong with these kinds of campaigns. So in all your years of experience, has competitor bidding ever backfired on you? And if it has, what happened?
So it kind of backfired on us in a different way, because I was working in-house, it was a SaaS brand, and a direct competitor asked us to stop bidding on their brand. They were bidding on ours. It was kind of like a mutual thing. And the owners, they both agreed, like between themselves, okay, we'll stop, shake, gentleman handshake, that's it. And then a few weeks later, we actually noticed that they were still bidding on us, and they were doing so even more aggressively than they had ever. I just took that as an agreement that we weren't going to do it. So I stopped running that campaign, and didn't think to check that they hadn't done it. So, people do that. People do reach out and say, hey, you shouldn't be bidding on our brand. There is no rule against you bidding on someone else's brand. That's absolutely fine. But I think, if you're going to make an agreement, then stick to it, because then we just came back harder, and then it just becomes like that poking that bear in that battle. And
that was going to be my next question of when you find out that that's what they were doing, like what was your response? And
budget, unlimited.
Yeah, so be careful. So I just got a couple more questions before we wrap up. But in one of our recent webinars, we were focusing on B2B lead gen strategies, and as part of that, competitor bidding was part of the conversation. And our guest, Violetta, at the time, she mentioned that one of the things she really likes to do is to go to forums, in particular Reddit, and to basically investigate what people are complaining about in terms of your competitors, and then use that information to guide your keywords that you're bidding on, and also the kind of information that's on your landing pages. So is that something that you've done in the past, and is there anything that you'd add to that particular side of the research component?
Yeah, I love Reddit at the moment for finding out just what's going on with people's thoughts and opinions. I think it's a great route to go down. And if you work in quite a niche industry, so for example, my last role, I had a lot of DevOps clients, very specific, very niche, and they had their own little niche forums. So, digging into those types of platforms, the wealth of information that these people are sharing with each other, the recommendations. Oh, hey guys, have you seen this new company that's come out? Like, they are such great places for finding competitors that you may not have even heard of yet, because they're so specific to that industry. They're still new. So I think that Reddit is a great place. Any niche forums that you might have to check out. Something I also like to check out is reviews, or rating sites for SaaS, like G2, Capterra, because as much as it's great to see what people like about a brand or a product, they will usually say the bad things about them as well. That might be the customer support was really bad, or I wasn't able to get in contact with my account manager for 3 weeks. Like those types of shocking things which people have experienced, you can take that, make sure in your ad copy, we've got award-winning customer service or 24/7 support available. Just those little things which people aren't happy with, making sure that you're getting them. So review sites as well. Review sites and ratings are a great place to go to.
Yeah, definitely check those out. And just to wrap up, what kind of optimizations do you find yourself tending to make when it comes to these kind of campaigns? So if you've been running them for a while and you're looking to optimize them and enhance the efficiency or performance of them, what are the kind of usual areas that you're going to and tweaking?
Something in particular that I end up doing with any competitive campaigns that I'm running is working on the keywords, because again, you kind of think, what people are going to look for, XYZ competitor or stuff like that. But actually, once you start to see what people are interested in, maybe adding some more long tail search terms in there, things that people are actually needing and wanting from a product or service, which a competitor isn't providing. Something which I also really want people to remember with these campaigns is that you don't have to keep bidding on those competitors if they're not working for you. That's why I like to break my campaigns down into one campaign and specific ad groups. If competitor Y isn't working, I'm not getting many leads from them or clicks at all, I can easily pause that. I can continue running that campaign. I can keep it going. But my caveat with anything that I do with PPC is I always say, after 3 to 4 months and you've tried your hardest, you've optimized as much as possible, if it's not working, don't be stubborn. Let it go. Competitor bidding, I've seen, for most brands that I've worked with, I have seen it work, but there has been instances where it's just been too expensive. The return on investment just hasn't been there. And you have to get to the point where you say, we've tried our hardest, but it's just not the strategy for this brand. So I think knowing when to give up is also really important when it comes to optimizing. Is you can only do so much to make it work. Some people are set on going with your competitors and you are not going to be able to change their mind.
Yeah, that's sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, oh, but we've spent so much on this, and that makes it really hard to let go of the money that you've put in. But sometimes, there's no point throwing good money after bad, and that's
just let it
right.
Go.
Yeah, let it go. So on that note, I think we've covered everything that we need to cover there today. Thank you again so much for joining us, Sophie. Definitely a lot of actionable points there for people to go away and experiment with. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or let people know about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I could have spoken about landing pages for hours, so it's a good thing that you kept me on track with that one. So I usually post about landing pages. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, then there'll be plenty of chat about landing pages on there to dig into that a little bit more detail.
Perfect. Do go check out Sophie on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out for updates on Dexter as well. So thanks again, Sophie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Paid Media Lab. Thank you for tuning in. If you found it helpful, hit the subscribe button to get the next episode as soon as it's released. Subscribing costs nothing. It only takes a few seconds to do, but it makes a huge difference to us because it enables us to continue booking the best possible guests and delivering you great content. In the meantime, if you're looking for more free guides, tips, and tools, head to lunio.ai and click on the resources tab in the nav bar. And lastly, if you know any other marketers who'd find these strategies helpful, please do tell them about the show, and I'll see you in the next episode.